My sister stole my husband, my home, and my future. But when I discovered the truth about what she'd been planning all along, I realized her betrayal ran deeper than I ever imagined. After 15 years of being the good sister, the loyal daughter, the one who always put family first, I was left with nothing but ashes and a burning need for justice that would consume us both. I am Victoria Hayes, a 34-year-old real estate attorney in Denver, Colorado. For the past decade, I'd built a successful practice specializing in commercial property law, working 18-hour days to establish myself in a competitive field. I thought I had everything: a thriving career, a beautiful home in Cherry Creek, and what I believed was a solid marriage to David, my college sweetheart. My younger sister, Cassandra, had always been the free spirit, the one who drifted from job to job, relationship to relationship, always landing on our parents' doorstep when life got too complicated. I was the responsible one, the anchor, the sister who always helped her get back on her feet. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I was reviewing contracts at my kitchen table, steam rising from my coffee mug, when I noticed David's phone buzzing incessantly with text messages. He was in the shower, and normally I wouldn't have looked, but something about the urgency of the notifications made my stomach twist. When I saw Cassandra's name flashing on the screen again and again, my blood ran cold. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Victoria suspects nothing. The house will be perfect for us once she's gone. Did you transfer the money like we discussed?" My hands trembled as I scrolled through weeks of messages, each one a dagger through my heart. They weren't just having an affair, they had been systematically planning to destroy my life. David had been funneling money from our joint accounts into a private account with Cassandra's name on it. They'd been house hunting, looking at properties they planned to buy together. Most devastating of all, they'd been strategizing how to manipulate the divorce proceedings to leave me with as little as possible. The shower turned off upstairs, and I quickly placed his phone back where I'd found it, my mind reeling. Every family dinner where Cassandra had sat across from me, asking about my marriage with fake concern. Every time she'd offered to help around the house when David was traveling. Every sisterly moment that I'd treasured. All of it had been calculated. Deception. When David came downstairs, whistling and straightening his tie, I watched him with new eyes. This man I'd shared 15 years of my life with, who knew my dreams and fears better than anyone, had been planning my destruction while I slept beside him each night. The casual way he kissed my cheek and asked about my day made bile rise in my throat. "I'll be late tonight," he said, grabbing his briefcase. "Client dinner." I knew now that he'd be with Cassandra, probably celebrating how cleverly they'd orchestrated my downfall. Instead of confronting him, I simply nodded and watched him leave. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how deep this betrayal went. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house in Littleton, where Cassandra had been staying for the past month. She'd told me she needed time to figure things out after her latest boyfriend had cheated on her. The irony wasn't lost on me now. She'd been crying on my shoulder about infidelity while actively pursuing my husband. "Victoria." "What a surprise," Cassandra said when she opened the door, her smile so practiced and warm that it made my skin crawl. She was wearing a new dress I didn't recognize, expensive looking, probably bought with money stolen from my accounts. "We need to talk," I said, pushing past her into the familiar living room where we'd grown up playing together, where I'd comforted her through countless heartbreaks, where I'd celebrated every small victory in her chaotic life. "Of course," she said, settling onto the couch with an expression of sisterly concern that now seemed like a mask. "You look upset. Is everything okay with David?" The audacity of her question hit me like a physical blow. She was still playing the role of the caring sister even now, knowing what she'd done. I studied her face, the green eyes we shared, inherited from our mother, the delicate features that had always made her the prettier sister, the one who drew attention wherever she went. Had she always resented me for having stability while she struggled? Had our entire relationship been built on her jealousy and my naivety? "Actually, things with David are perfect," I lied smoothly. "Better than ever. We've been talking about renewing our vows, maybe buying a bigger house. He's been so attentive lately, so present in our marriage." I watched her face carefully as I spoke, looking for cracks in her composure. There, a slight tightening around her eyes, a barely perceptible tension in her jaw. She was good at hiding her emotions, but I'd known her my entire life. "That's wonderful," she said, but her voice sounded strained. "You two deserve happiness." Deserve. The word hung between us like an accusation. In her mind, I didn't deserve the life I'd built. I didn't deserve David's love or our comfortable home or the success I'd worked so hard to achieve. Somehow she'd convinced herself that taking it all away from me was justified. "You know, Cass, I've been thinking about how grateful I am for family," I continued, watching her squirm. "How important loyalty is. Trust. I mean, what would we do without people we can count on completely?" "Absolutely," she agreed. But she was fidgeting now, playing with her hair the way she always did when she was nervous. Family is everything. I left that afternoon without revealing what I knew, but with a crystal clear understanding of what I was dealing with. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a mistake born of passion. This was calculated, premeditated, betrayal by the two people I'd trusted most in the world. Over the next week, I hired a private investigator and began gathering evidence. I discovered that their affair had been going on for over 6 months, ever since Cassandra had come to stay with us after losing her job. She'd seduced David in my own home, in the guest room where she'd slept while I'd worked late, believing I was providing for all of us. The financial betrayal was even more extensive than I'd initially realized. David had transferred nearly $80,000 from our savings to their joint account. He'd also taken out a loan against our house without my knowledge, forging my signature. They'd been planning to use that money to disappear, to start fresh somewhere new while leaving me buried in debt. But the worst discovery came when I found emails between them discussing the divorce strategy. Cassandra had been researching ways to paint me as an unfit wife, a workaholic who neglected her marriage, someone who was emotionally unavailable and potentially unstable. They'd planned to use my dedication to my career against me, to make it seem like I'd driven David away with my ambition. Reading those emails, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The Victoria who had always been understanding, always made excuses for family, always put others' needs before her own, that woman died. In her place was someone harder, someone who understood that kindness without boundaries was just weakness waiting to be exploited. I began planning my response with the same methodical approach I used in my legal practice. If they wanted to play games with contracts and manipulation, they'd chosen the wrong opponent. I was a lawyer who specialized in complex financial disputes. I knew exactly how to protect my assets and expose their fraud. First, I secured our remaining joint accounts, moving the money to accounts they couldn't access. I documented every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, every piece of evidence that would demonstrate their criminal conspiracy. I also began recording my conversations with both of them, gathering proof of their deception and lies. The hardest part was maintaining the facade of normalcy. Every morning, I had to kiss David goodbye, knowing he was betraying me. Every phone call with Cassandra required me to pretend I still trusted her completely. The emotional toll was devastating, but it was necessary. I needed them to believe they were winning right up until the moment I destroyed them both. David grew increasingly bold as the weeks passed, probably interpreting my calm demeanor as obliviousness. He started staying out later, making less effort to hide his phone, even bringing home the scent of Cassandra's perfume on his clothes. He'd begun treating me like a roommate rather than a wife, and I could see the contempt in his eyes whenever he thought I wasn't looking. Cassandra, meanwhile, had started making subtle comments about my marriage during our weekly sister lunches. She'd suggest that David seemed unhappy, that maybe I should be more attentive, that successful women sometimes struggled to maintain relationships. She was laying the groundwork for their eventual revelation, trying to make me doubt myself so that when the truth came out, I'd blame myself rather than them. The breakthrough came when I discovered their timeline. They planned to reveal their affair on the anniversary of my parents' death, a date that held profound meaning for me. The day when Cassandra and I had promised each other we'd always be there for one another. They'd chosen that specific date because they knew it would maximize my emotional devastation. This wasn't just betrayal, it was psychological warfare designed to break me completely. That's when I knew I had to act first. Chose the setting carefully. Our family's annual 4th of July barbecue, where all our relatives and friends would be gathered. If they wanted to destroy me publicly, I'd return the favor. I spent weeks preparing, gathering every piece of evidence, consulting with colleagues about the criminal charges I could file, planning every detail of their exposure. The morning of the barbecue, I felt strangely calm. I'd spent months drowning in betrayal and rage, but now that the moment had arrived, I felt nothing but cold determination. I dressed carefully in a red sundress that had always been David's favorite, styled my hair the way he liked it, put on the jewelry he'd given me for our anniversary. If this was going to be our final performance as a married couple, I wanted to look the part. David was in an unusually good mood, probably because he thought his deception was nearly complete. He helped me carry food to the backyard, complimented my cooking, even held my hand as our relatives began arriving. To anyone watching, we looked like the perfect couple. Cassandra arrived wearing a white dress that was almost bridal in its elegance. She hugged me tightly, whispering how much she loved me, how grateful she was to have such a wonderful sister. The words felt like poison in my ears, but I smiled and hugged her back, marveling at her ability to lie so effortlessly. As the afternoon progressed, I watched them carefully avoid each other, maintaining the pretense of distant politeness. But I caught the subtle signals between them, the meaningful glances, the way David's eyes lingered on her figure, the small smile that played at Cassandra's lips whenever she thought no one was looking. They were probably planning their next move, deciding when to drop their bombshell and shatter my world. Could I have everyone's attention? I called out around 5 o'clock when the party was in full swing. Our backyard was filled with aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, everyone who mattered in our lives. David looked surprised but pleased, probably thinking I was going to make some romantic toast about our marriage. I wanted to share something important with all of you, I continued, my voice steady and clear. Something about family and loyalty and the people we choose to trust with our hearts. Cassandra was watching me with a puzzled expression, but I could see a flicker of unease in her eyes. David moved closer, probably wanting to support whatever announcement he thought I was making. Over the past few months, I've learned some difficult truths about the people closest to me, I said, reaching into my purse for the folder I'd prepared. I've discovered that trust can be weaponized, that loyalty can be a one-way street, and that sometimes the people who claim to love us are actually working to destroy us. The crowd had gone quiet now, sensing the shift in my tone. I could see confusion on my relatives' faces, concern in my friends' expressions. David's smile was beginning to fade, and Cassandra had gone very still. David, my husband of 15 years, and Cassandra, my beloved sister, have been having an affair for the past 6 months, I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent backyard. But it's not just an affair, it's been a calculated conspiracy to steal my money, forge my signature on loan documents, and manipulate our divorce proceedings to leave me with nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the sound of someone dropping a plate, the distant noise of traffic from the street, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then the chaos began. Victoria, what are you talking about? David stepped forward, his face a mask of shocked innocence. This is crazy. You're having some kind of breakdown. Am I? I opened the folder and began pulling out printed emails, bank statements, photographs from the private investigator. Here's an email from Cassandra to David discussing how to paint me as an unstable workaholic. Here's documentation of the $80,000 you transferred from our joint savings account. Here's a photo of you two house hunting together last Tuesday when you told me you were at a client dinner. I handed the evidence to my Uncle Robert, a retired judge who'd always been the family's voice of reason. As he flipped through the papers, his expression grew darker with each page. There's more, I continued, turning to address Cassandra directly. Did you want to tell everyone about your plan to reveal your affair on the anniversary of our parents' death? About how you specifically chose that date because you knew it would cause me maximum emotional damage? Cassandra's face had gone white, all pretense of innocence finally stripped away. Victoria, please, let me explain. Explain what? I demanded, feeling 15 years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. Explain how you moved into our home and seduced my husband while I supported you financially. Explain how you've been pretending to comfort me about my marriage problems while secretly causing them. Explain how you convinced the man I loved that I deserved to lose everything I'd worked for. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, she whispered, tears starting to flow. We didn't plan it, we fell in love. You fell in love? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You fell in love with my money, maybe, with the life I built. But love doesn't involve stealing and fraud and emotional manipulation. David tried one more time to regain control of the situation. Everyone, please, Victoria is clearly having an emotional crisis. She's been under a lot of stress at work, and I think she's projecting her own problems onto us. David, Uncle Robert, interrupted, holding up the bank statements. These documents show clear evidence of financial fraud. This isn't a marital dispute. This is criminal behavior. The crowd began to murmur, relatives and friends trying to process what they'd witnessed. I could see disgust on some faces, pity on others, shock on all of them. My cousin Jennifer was crying. My best friend Sarah looked like she wanted to hit someone. I've already filed for divorce, I announced. I've also reported the financial fraud to the police and the Colorado Bar Association, since David's actions constitute professional misconduct. You'll both be hearing from the authorities very soon. You can't do this, Cassandra said desperately. We're family. You can't destroy your own sister over a man. I'm not destroying you over a man, I replied coldly. I'm holding you accountable for destroying me. There's a difference. The party ended quickly after that, with relatives and friends filtering out in awkward silence, many of them stopping to offer me quiet words of support. David and Cassandra left together, no longer bothering to hide their connection now that it was exposed. I watched them drive away in David's car and felt nothing but relief that the pretense was finally over. The aftermath was swift and brutal for both of them. The criminal charges for fraud and forgery carried serious penalties, and David's law license was suspended pending investigation. Cassandra, who had no significant assets or income, couldn't afford a good attorney and ended up pleading guilty to avoid jail time. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward once all the evidence was presented. David's attempt to hide assets and forge documents had backfired spectacularly, and the judge awarded me everything: the house, the remaining savings, even David's retirement accounts as compensation for his fraud. His career was effectively over, and his reputation in Denver's legal community was destroyed. But watching their lives implode didn't bring me the satisfaction I'd expected. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself struggling with unexpected emotions. The rage that had sustained me through the planning and execution of their exposure began to fade, leaving behind a hollow sadness that seemed impossible to fill. I threw myself into work, taking on more cases, working longer hours, traveling for business more frequently. Colleagues praised my dedication and clients appreciated my fierce advocacy. But I knew I was running from something. The betrayal had changed me in fundamental ways, and I wasn't sure I liked the person I'd become. The hardest part was losing my family along with my marriage. Our extended family had been torn apart by the revelation, with relatives choosing sides and relationships fracturing under the weight of the scandal. Some family members blamed me for exposing Cassandra and David so publicly, arguing that I should have handled it privately to preserve family unity. Others supported my decision but struggled with the awkwardness of maintaining relationships with both sides. My parents' siblings were particularly divided. Aunt Margaret insisted that family forgiveness was more important than justice, while Uncle Robert fully supported my actions and cut off contact with Cassandra entirely. Holiday gatherings became exercises in careful navigation, with family members checking who would be attending before committing to events. 6 months after the barbecue, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Cassandra had somehow gotten past building security and was waiting in my reception area when I returned from court. She looked terrible, thin, pale, wearing clothes that had seen better days. The woman who had once turned heads wherever she went now looked broken and desperate. "Please," she said when she saw me. "Just give me 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I agreed to speak with her in my office. She sat across from my desk in the same chair where clients usually detailed their legal troubles, and for the first time since childhood, I felt like the older sister despite being younger. "I know you hate me," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness or understanding or anything from you, but I need you to know that I never meant for it to go as far as it did." "How far did you mean for it to go?" I asked. "Where exactly was the line you didn't intend to cross?" She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red with unshed tears. "I was jealous," she admitted. "I've been jealous of you my entire life. You were always the smart one, the successful one, the one everyone was proud of. I never felt like I could measure up. So you decided to destroy me instead?" "I decided to take something that was yours," she said honestly. "David was unhappy, Victoria. I didn't seduce him so much as provide an alternative. He was already looking for a way out of your marriage." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though part of me had suspected as much. "Even if that's true, it doesn't excuse what you did. The financial fraud, the manipulation, the psychological warfare, that was all calculated cruelty." "I know," she whispered. "Once it started, it became this terrible momentum. We convinced ourselves that you'd be better off without David, that you didn't really love him anyway because you worked so much. We told ourselves we were setting you free. You told yourselves a lot of convenient lies." She nodded, tears finally spilling over. "The worst part is that it wasn't even worth it. David and I, we don't work without the secret, without the excitement of betraying you. Once it was all out in the open, we realized we don't actually like each other very much. We've already broken up." I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness at this revelation. Their great love affair, the relationship that had been worth destroying our family over, had crumbled the moment it faced the light of day. "I'm not telling you this because I want sympathy," Cassandra continued. "I'm telling you because I want you to know that you won, completely. I have nothing left. No money, no home, no family, no self-respect. You destroyed me as thoroughly as I tried to destroy you, and I deserved every bit of it." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "I guess I just wanted you to know that justice was served. You can stop being angry now if you want to. You can move on." After she left, I sat in my office for hours, watching the Denver skyline through my floor-to-ceiling windows as the sun set behind the mountains. Cassandra was right about one thing. I had won. I'd protected my assets, exposed their crimes, and seen them both face consequences for their actions. But victory felt hollow when it came at the cost of everything I'd once believed about family and love. Over the following months, I began working with a therapist to process not just the betrayal, but my response to it. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that while my actions had been legally and morally justified, they'd also revealed aspects of my personality that troubled me. The cold calculation, the methodical planning of their destruction, the satisfaction I'd felt watching their lives implode. These weren't qualities I'd known I possessed. "You protected yourself," she reminded me during one session. "When faced with people who were actively trying to harm you, you used your skills and resources to fight back. That's not wrong. But I enjoyed it," I admitted. "Part of me enjoyed planning their downfall, enjoyed watching them suffer." "What does that make me?" "Human," she said simply. "Anger is a normal response to betrayal. The important thing is what you do with that anger going forward." Slowly, I began to rebuild my life on my own terms. I scaled back my work hours and started pursuing interests I'd neglected: photography, hiking in the Colorado mountains, volunteer work with legal aid organizations. I bought a smaller house in a different neighborhood, somewhere with no memories of David or family gatherings. Dating was complicated at first. The betrayal had left me hypervigilant about people's motives, constantly analyzing whether potential partners were genuinely interested in me or simply attracted to my success and financial stability. But eventually, I met Marcus, a high school teacher who lived in a modest apartment and drove a car older than some of his students. His honesty and simplicity were exactly what I needed. The relationship with my extended family never fully recovered, but it evolved into something more authentic. Without the obligation of maintaining false harmony, I developed closer relationships with relatives who shared my values and gradually distanced myself from those who didn't. Uncle Robert and I grew particularly close, bonding over our shared belief that accountability matters more than family loyalty when someone causes genuine harm. 2 years after the barbecue, I received a wedding invitation from my cousin Jennifer. As I read through the guest list, I noticed that Cassandra's name wasn't on it. When I called Jennifer to RSVP, she explained that while she still loved Cassandra, she couldn't invite someone who had caused so much family pain to what was supposed to be a celebration of love and commitment. "I know some people think you were too harsh," Jennifer told me, "but I think about what you went through and I can't imagine having that kind of strength. You stood up for yourself when no one else would." The wedding was beautiful, and for the first time in years, I found myself enjoying a family gathering. Without the tension of pretending everything was fine, without the careful navigation around uncomfortable truths, the celebration felt genuine. I danced with Marcus, laughed with my cousins, and felt something I hadn't experienced since before the betrayal: genuine happiness. As I watched Jennifer and her new husband exchange vows, promising to honor and cherish each other, I reflected on how naive I'd been to believe such promises were unbreakable. But I also realized that my experience, as painful as it had been, had given me something valuable: the knowledge that I could survive the worst kind of betrayal and emerge stronger. Last time I saw Cassandra was at a grocery store 6 months later. She was working as a cashier, wearing a uniform that had seen better days, looking older than her years. When she saw me, she froze, clearly debating whether to acknowledge me or pretend she hadn't noticed. I made the decision for both of us, walking over to her register despite having already finished my shopping elsewhere in the store. "Hello, Cass," I said quietly. "Victoria." She looked nervous, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. "How are you?" "I'm well." "You?" She shrugged, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Getting by, day by day." We stood there for a moment, two sisters who had once shared everything, now separated by a chasm of betrayal and consequences that could never be fully bridged. "I'm glad you're okay," she said finally, and I could hear genuine sentiment in her voice for the first time in years. "I'm glad you're working," I replied, meaning it. "I hope you're finding some peace." She nodded, tears threatening again. "I think about calling you sometimes, writing letters, but I don't know what I'd say that would matter." "Maybe someday," I said, though I wasn't sure I meant it. "Take care of yourself, Cass." As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not forgiveness exactly, but something like acceptance. She was my sister, and despite everything she'd done, some part of me would always love the girl who had built blanket forts with me and shared secrets under the covers after bedtime. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone who had made choices that forever altered the course of both our lives. The woman I'd become in the aftermath of betrayal was different too, harder in some ways, but also more honest about human nature and more protective of her own well-being. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to value actions over words, and to understand that sometimes justice matters more than harmony. Marcus and I married the following spring in a small ceremony at Garden of the Gods, surrounded by friends and the family members who had stood by me through the darkest period of my life. As I spoke my vows, promising to honor and cherish him, I meant every word with a depth of understanding I'd never possessed before. I knew now what those promises really meant, how fragile they were, and how much courage it took to trust someone with your whole heart. During our honeymoon in Italy, I finally felt ready to stop looking backward and start building something new. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined my entire narrative. I'd been broken and rebuilt, tested, and strengthened, and I'd emerged with a clearer understanding of my worth and my boundaries. In the end, the greatest revenge wasn't the destruction of their lives or the public exposure of their crimes. It was my refusal to let their betrayal make me smaller, more cynical, or less capable of love. They had tried to break me, but instead, they had revealed strength I didn't know I possessed. Standing on a balcony in Rome, watching the sun set over the ancient city, I realized that while I could never go back to the naive woman I'd been before, I wouldn't want to. That woman had been too trusting, too willing to sacrifice her own well-being for others, too afraid to demand the respect she deserved. The woman I'd become knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less. The betrayal had cost me a marriage, a sister, and my faith in unconditional family loyalty. But it had given me something more valuable. The knowledge that I could survive anything, the strength to demand honesty in all my relationships, and the wisdom to understand that sometimes the people who claim to love us are the ones most capable of causing us harm. As Marcus joined me on the balcony, wrapping his arms around me as we watched the Roman skyline, I felt genuinely at peace for the first time in years. The scars from Cassandra and David's betrayal would always be with me, but they were no longer bleeding wounds. They had become part of the story of how I learned to fight for myself, how I discovered my own strength, and how I refused to let anyone else's cruelty define my future. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment or revenge. Sometimes it's about refusing to let betrayal make you betray yourself. In the end, that might be the most powerful victory of all.